Good evening. I'm Hope Preston, and welcome to the Washington County Master Gardeners monthly speaker series. As you can see, the title of tonight's presentation, it is Garden Future: Growing Resilience in a Changing Climate, a topic that will be, I think, of increasing interest to us in the coming years, possibly months. LeAnn Locher is our presenter tonight. She is a professional gardening communicator. What an interesting job, LeAnn.
I feel lucky.
You are. She serves as the statewide outreach coordinator for the OSU Master Gardener Program. And among other things at OSU, she works with the horticultural faculty on communicating their work to the public through website, promotions, and social media, and with the Master Gardener Program, providing communication strategy, creative, and messaging. She lives and works out of her, I love this, LeAnn, Cramscaped garden in North Portland. I have the feeling it's very full. There's probably no room for weeds in it.
That's the positive of it, right? And if I lose a plant, well, then it just means that I finally have space to plant something new.
Yes, to add something new. She, along with Brooke Edmonds, is the co-lead on the Garden Future project, which she will be speaking about tonight. I would ask everybody if, as questions come up, if you would please put them in the Q&A, and at the end of LeAnn's presentation, I will go through the questions and feed them to her at that time. So LeAnn, I will turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Hope. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. Brooke Edmonds is my colleague. She's Associate Professor of Practice and Horticulture for OSU Extension Community Horticulture, specifically in Marion and Polk counties. She is not able to be here this evening due to a family emergency. She and I co-lead the Garden Future Project, and we tag team a lot on this work, but tonight you're going to be stuck just with me. Hope, thank you for the introduction. My background is as a communications consultant for national organizations that have a focus on health, medicine, and social justice. My work at OSU Extension started about 5 years ago. But before that, probably maybe 10, 15 years ago, I actually became a master gardener here in Multnomah County. And, it's a slippery slide. Gardening is one thing, then you become a master gardener, and then you work for the program, and here I am. So I feel lucky to be here tonight and to be here with all of you gardeners. You're my people. So before we start, I have a question for you, and I'm wondering if you can get your fingers ready and get ready to answer some things in the chat for me. I am wondering, are you seeing the effects of climate change in your gardening? And I say in your gardening because it may not be your garden. It may be a community garden. It may be a neighbor's garden. It may be small spaces or different kinds of spaces that you garden in. But could you answer into the chat? Are you able to? Are you seeing the effects of climate change? This is a question that we're asking gardeners all over the state. In fact, over 1,000 gardeners have answered this question with us online, and I'm going to share with you about that tonight, but I'd want to know with you. Yeah, maybe, no, kinda, yes, we have a couple of yeses. Okay, I'll share a little later what folks are telling us across the state about what they're seeing and if they're seeing it. If you are seeing it, climate change show up, how are you seeing the effects of climate change in your gardening? What exactly are you seeing? Maybe it's been hotter, or has it been more dry? Have you seen planting schedules change? Maybe like things getting later or earlier when you usually set seed out or starts out. Maybe you're seeing a need to use more water, or maybe you're seeing a lot more wind where you live. If you want to share those, that would be great. If not, that's okay too. I can share those later. But if you,
LeAnn, I am wondering if maybe people aren't able to share. I've got the chat set on to everybody, but only Tara and I have successfully posted. So there may be something going on here.
Yeah, it's possible. You're still going to get the fireworks from me anyway. So even if you weren't able to answer that question in chat, if you were thinking those questions, answers in your head, congratulations. That means that you've just participated in Garden Future. And I think that really just demonstrates the simplicity of what we're talking about when we talk about the project, in that it's simply by talking about it. You know, research shows that simply talking about climate change with your neighbors, your friends, your trusted community members, fellow gardeners like we are here today, it can be a really powerful way to address climate change. And it addresses so many issues while we can provoke hope and actually ending isolation and moving us from this state of unknown and panic to a place of, okay, let's face this together. And at the heart, that's really what Garden Future is about. It's funny when things can be that simple, right? I think a lot of times we expect things to be complex. And yes, climate change is complex. But when we really get down to it and what this project is about, the beauty of it is its simplicity. So, the goals for today, and what I hope that you leave with, is an understanding of what Garden Future is and how we can connect communication strategy with that. Recognize what Oregon gardeners are observing and how they are adapting to climate change. Identify the most common needs and opportunities for OSU Extension and Master Gardener volunteers to support climate resilient gardening. And I hope you're feeling inspired and empowered, actually, to take part in this ongoing conversation, which is translating research into action in their own counties. So let's go ahead and get into it. Just some context for you of where this all started. In 2024, the Master Gardener program, we received some grant funding from OSU Extension and the OSU College of Agricultural Sciences. This is where the Master Gardener program lives at OSU, in Extension and in the College of Ag. And the context of this is straightforward, is that we developed programming that was to be specifically focused on climate resiliency. And our challenge was, what could we do with this small seed money? So when I say we received money, it was a very tiny amount of money. It was not loads of money. But, as gardeners are, we know how to stretch a dollar, right? And let's see what we can do. And so our challenge was, what could we do with this seed money? And specifically, how could we use the magic of the Master Gardener Volunteer Program for that? And we also knew this was going to be a statewide project. So this is an initiative that comes from the statewide office, which currently is a staff of about 3. However, even though it's me here tonight, and Brooke is a co-lead, I want to make sure that you know that there's a whole team of OSU Extension Master Gardener faculty and staff that are in the working group that are behind the Garden Future project. We worked together to identify needs, and we assessed, what is out there when it comes to climate change and gardening in Oregon. And the truth was that there was really limited information. Climate change is happening quickly, and it can really be seen as political. We knew that we would need to both educate and engage in order to educate better about creating garden resiliency. And so we created a framework for what it might be. But know that all of the faces and more than the folks that you see here are a part of the Garden Future team. So we developed this framework and we test drove some of that at the statewide Master Gardener Conference in Corvallis in the summers of 2024 and 2025. These are some photos from that where we previewed some things. We asked a lot of questions. We got a lot of feedback, and we heard some really positive responses to some of the directions that we were thinking of going. And we designed the campaign to include 2 components. One is outreach materials to support Master Gardener volunteer educators across the state when we're talking about climate change and gardening, and then community engagement. And so we're going to talk about both of those, but really we're going to talk about community engagement. And I'm going to share with you tonight the things that we've heard from gardeners and how climate change is showing up. But before I show you those pieces of Garden Future, I think it's really important to understand that it is built, this whole project is built upon grounded research and strategies. What does community engagement and specifically communications have to do with climate change and Garden Future? So I dug into the research specifically about how do we talk, how do we frame, and how do we engage people about climate change? And we know that Garden Future would need to include 7 overarching strategies. So first, we're making climate change personal and local. So research shows that most people will tune out when it comes to broad global messages about climate change. But when it's communicated through the lens of their own backyard or garden, whether it's plants dying or watering restrictions or extreme heat, that's when people feel it. That's when it really matters. And so we're using tools to ground climate change in familiar and lived experiences. Number 2, it overcomes emotional and psychological barriers. There are barriers. We looked at research from Yale and Berkeley that said that, folks really want to avoid climate conversations due to fear or dissonance. But when we can frame those conversations positively with empathy and actionable steps, people will really lean in instead of tuning out. And I really love that because when we frame things positively with empathy, I think about the role of gardeners and specifically a lot of times master gardeners, right? Like how our role of being empathetic and helping folks, like when they kill a plant and it feels like it's the end of the world and we tell them that it's going to be okay, that we can try again, or even I kill plants, that role of empathy, I think is really embedded in so much of the gardening spirit, right? And so the research says that when we can frame it this way, that people will lean into conversations around climate change. So number 3, Garden Future builds community through storytelling. People trust people, right? So stories that are shared by fellow gardeners are way more powerful than just giving you the facts alone. So when master gardeners or other gardeners share how they've adapted their practice, like when you get together with another gardener and you strategize like, well, what did you do during this last year? Oh, I did this. When we share those things, it sparks a ripple effect of inspiration and action. And we can also see support for this kind of work through the Climate Stress and Grief Initiative at OSU. Their studies reveal that 88% of respondents of their survey emphasize the importance of addressing climate stress and grief within their communities. So sharing stories and experiences from and among community can go so much further than when it's just data from an institution. So climate change for many people begins in fear. And, we're talking about shifting us from fear to empowerment. The belief that our actions matter. So maybe learning how to build a drip irrigation system or how to remove invasive species. When we share these through communication tools like videos or social media or through conversational emails, these kinds of things can actually become contagious in a good way. So number 5, it centers gardeners as change makers. Yes, gardeners can be change makers. Gardeners are already noticing shifts in seasons, and are at our heart, right, are observant and curious, and we're action oriented. And when we can affirm this identity as people who are already doing these things, it can really encourage a deeper engagement and leadership. Number 6 is that we're using peer-to-peer trust. This is not from top down. So master gardeners are not scientists in white coats. Master gardener volunteers are friends and fellow community members, and this makes us messengers. And so when we share climate resilient ideas or techniques, others listen. And number 7 is that we can really create a movement. We are turning isolated actions into a visible collective movement where folks can share back what gardeners are seeing and doing. And through that, they can get that sense that you're not alone and you're part of something bigger. So the Garden Future life cycle, there are a lot of pieces that make up Garden Future, and this element of engaging in conversations. And this kind of circle, I want to walk you through it. And that is that first, there's the initial engagement. That's the little guy up at the top. It begins with a Master Gardener volunteer or with a program online. And it begins with a really simple question: what's your garden future? We're not leading on the outset with climate change. We'll get there, right? It's kind of like peeling an onion. We're going to start at the very outside. What's your garden future? How are you seeing the future of your garden? And it begins engagement. We have really bright and friendly and colorful illustrations featuring gardeners in action and fruit and veggies and native plants. And the state of Oregon is in the illustration as well. Then you can see on that circle, the gardener is activated, right? So we ask them, tell us what you're seeing in the garden. What are you doing in the garden? And what do you need more help with? So you remember those first questions that I asked you. Those are the first two core questions of Garden Future. The third one is, what do you need more help with, right? And that's this activation. Their answers, when they give them to us, we then distribute those back in multiple places. We share out what gardeners are seeing and doing, and we amplify what kind of resources we already have, or that we've pulled together, or that are in development to be able to help, that are both from OSU and from beyond. So let's go through this cycle just a bit and dig in. A Master Gardener volunteer interacts with a gardener at a market tabling event. Let's say it's an event you're already at, excuse me, and you're wearing a button that says, what's your garden future? They see this fun poster. It has Oregon on it, all these cool illustrations, all this stuff. And the master gardeners are engaging and asking, what's your garden future? We're listening to gardeners about what changes they're seeing in their gardens and asking, has climate change affected your gardening? What are you seeing? It's a back and forth. It's a conversation. We're listening, and some folks will really want to talk, and they get it. And maybe they tell us, I have never watered as much as I have had to do this past year, right? When you get into a conversation with a fellow gardener, we can talk for a while. And this is a nice place to have that conversation. What are you seeing? So, what are you doing? And then we activate them to talk to us more. The gardener is engaged. So we ask, will you help with sharing what you're seeing with other gardeners? And we have three simple questions to stay informed and learn more as learn more about today. So you can see what's on the screen here. This is where the QR code that's here will take you to our three questions where you can answer those three questions yourself. And you can tell us, are you seeing it? Are you not? What specific changes have you seen? And you'll see that we're using really simple language here. We're saying, will you answer three questions? We're not saying, take this Qualtrics survey, which is insider language. We're really framing this for the general public. And at the end of this, you can sign up for our email list. And that's where you start to become this conversation where we have back and forth, where we ask more questions and we share what people are saying and doing, and folks can learn from each other. So we're talking with gardeners, we're listening, and there are going to be folks who really want to talk about it. There's going to be, and we're asking them, will you share more with us? Maybe we're capturing their answers with our iPhones. This is a person that I was really engaged with me at a gardening event here in the Portland area, and she definitely wanted to talk. And you can find her story and how she's seen it on her YouTube channel, along with a whole collection of folks, and we'll see some more of those. We're building a whole library of interviews on our YouTube channel, so folks can see what other people are seeing and doing, and again, not feel so alone. So we're now in the distribution phase. That video, right, that we took, we edited it into a short clip, and that's now in our YouTube channel. Other gardeners are sharing what they're seeing. We share it in our Instagram, where we reach over 6,000 people, and even more beyond that. We have it shared as a short video on our Facebook page. We have over 31,000 folks who follow our Facebook page. Maybe it's a quote I'll pull from that, and we'll share it in an email newsletter, including the newsletter we're sending to every person who answers our three questions and gives us their email address. You can see some of the stories that are up here. We're constantly growing these stories. I have a whole backload of stories that I need to edit and get up from really great conversations that we've had with gardeners from all over the state and the things that they're doing and learning and testing out and trying, faced with the changing issues that they're seeing with climate change is really inspiring. And these are not long 20-minute videos. Some of these are as short as like 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Um, but it's fascinating to hear how it shows up in different places in the state. So those answers are then shared in the online survey that give us in the program information that we need to better serve gardeners. And we can look at their answers by county. We can look at it by across the state. We can see what people are facing. On our Garden Future website, we've collected resources for gardening in a changing climate. This is a fully curated site where we've pulled together where we know that there are core issues. You can see these kind of core issues when you click on those arrows. It drops down to all kinds of resources that fall into that category that are specific for gardeners in Oregon. Um, the page of resources gets updated with more and more tools and information as gardeners share more with us of what they need. And we have things there from understanding the changes that are happening in planting zones to how to protect your plants in a heat wave, how to design a yard or garden that's fire wise. Stories from our Master Gardener demonstration gardens of examples of climate resilient gardening, like this one that you see in Roseburg. Washington County has been a tremendous player in sharing the demonstration garden at PCC and the incredible work that has been done there around designing it for climate resilience and sharing those stories and videos. And you've put in a sign that says about Garden Future. It's such an incredible place to actually see firsthand how to plant and grow in a changing climate. So kudos to Washington County Master Gardener garden team there. And we're constantly adding to these resources here. So we're able to listen to what gardeners need. And if we don't have it, we work to get it. So here's an example of something that we heard. Uh, Gardeners were telling us, look, all I want is a simple plant list of low water use plants that are specific to my region in Oregon, right? Simple. So voila, OSU faculty and program staff developed low water use plant lists for 7 regions of Oregon. They're available on the Garden Future resources page, and we have paper copies that are distributed by Master Gardener volunteers and their community outreach. Again, this is a really fast and easy way to respond. When we ask folks, what do you need? And this is what they say, and we're able to get that done with the specialists in the state who know this information that are specific to the region. This is just a really great mechanism for being able to respond quickly, to what people are asking for. But with the only way that we can know what people want is by folks answering our questions, right? So remember when the gardener answering the 3 questions, so they now receive a conversational email that comes about once a month. And in this email, we share with them new resources that they've asked for and what gardeners are telling us. So for example, in the email that you see here, a gardener in Clatsop County told us about chip drop and how that they're using chip drop for access to free mulch. And they had shared that information with us in the survey. Or how another gardener adds sheet mulch around everything that they plant. And we're asking more questions in these emails, like, are you growing a new plant that can handle climate change? Tell us. And people responded. And in the next email that I sent out, I shared some of those so that folks could learn from each other. And we'll also share what we're learning here in our social media channels as well. So, these little conversations end up showing up in many, many, many places. And so it ends up reaching thousands and thousands of folks. So this whole process is the life cycle of Garden Future. And the engagement, it all begins with the engagement of a Master Gardener volunteer. It's really simple. Volunteers engage and it brings education to gardeners. These gardeners then hear from other gardeners and they're not alone in what they're seeing and needed, and they feel connected and hopefully they can feel empowered as well. So I'm just going to I'm going to go a little quickly, I think, through this section. But the other aspect of this is about how this project is supporting Master Gardener volunteer educators. And I know not everybody that's on this call tonight or on this webinar tonight is a Master Gardener, but I think it's important to know and can be helpful to kind of understand the impact of the program. Um, Master Gardeners, we are in 29 counties, and here are some of the numbers from 2024. Across the state, we have over 2,300 volunteers. That means 157,000, over 157,000 hours were donated in 2024. That's a value of almost $5.5 million. 40 tons of produce were grown and shared by gardeners, Master Gardener volunteers, and 41,000 gardening questions were answered by faculty and volunteers. In 2024, we trained almost 500 new volunteers. So the program has a very large reach. And again, Master Gardener volunteers are community members. We're not scientists with white coats, right? Come from a campus in Corvallis. We're community members. And I think that's really, really important to remember. And what I like to talk about is the secret sauce of the Master Gardener program. So every county received a starter outreach kit, which had a volunteer guide. We had paper survey forms with had the QR code, like what you saw earlier. There's the banner, there's giveaway items, there's posters and stickers. There's those regional plant lists, there's an activities. There's a very cool landscape design game that was developed by a team in Multnomah County, where you can actually like rework what a typical garden, a front yard might be or a garden might be, and look at how you could change that up to be more climate resilient. It's something to do hands-on, which is a very cool thing that was developed by volunteers. It has the regional plant list. That's what you see here. These are some of the examples of the landscape design activity. These are the magnets that are based on regional plant lists here that I just talked about. The other element is that there is a learning module that is coming in 2026. It's currently going through accessibility testing and peer review that will be part of the Master Gardener training for every Master Gardener volunteer. That's going to be about the basics of climate change and increasing garden resiliency as well. So this past year, Master Gardener volunteers have been all over the place in being involved with this project and asking the public, what's your garden future? They've incorporated it into their community education events and where they're tabling at. Uh, Here we see it at the plant sale in Clatsop County. That last slide was at Hortlandia, there in Washington County, I think, right? In Lynn and Benton and Polk County, they did a seed giveaway where they bought Coreopsis seed at bulk, designed these small seed packets. They have these labels that are on them that they give out, and it has that QR code so folks can take our survey and be a part of Garden Future. Lynn County used this as a motivator that we are going, Lynn County is huge, that they wanted to bring Garden Future to the entire county geographically. So they took Garden Future all over to areas of the county that they don't normally visit. Polk and Marion County did this really cool little zine project, right? Zines are these little short pubs that you can fold from a single sheet of paper. And this was one that was about tips converting your lawn into a drought-resistant pollinator haven. Really super cute. They're going to be doing dandelion appreciation and identifying beneficial insects in the future with these. But this is a really fun project. And these are fun to give out. They're very inexpensive. They're creative. They used some of the artwork from Garden Future and all the content. And again, you can see that little QR code. I always note that when folks are using that, like, yes, you're doing it right. In Jackson County, they are growing their presentation library, and so they had specifically are working within native seeds. Again, this is all from the impetus of gardening in a change in climate. Uh, it's really interesting when we talk about climate change and when we talk about It really allows us to also take our program and talking about gardening into places where maybe we haven't been before. So Marion County, they took Garden Future to a climate fair, an energy and resource fair, where they had really fantastic engagement with folks that may not have come in contact with master gardeners before, right? And this has been so popular. Thousands of people have been reading about the Master Gardener demonstration gardens that have specialized areas or entire gardens that are built on climate resiliency. This is something where we have a very long story that we share on our program blog, and then we share clips on our website and on our social media channels. It's actually driven people to visit the gardens. I know in Douglas County, they definitely had shown an impact of visitors to the garden that came specifically to see the xeriscaping that they've done there. We've also highlighted the climate resilience in Jackson County's garden. And like I said earlier, in Washington counties, I'm going to be doing some highlighting of two gardens in Central Oregon coming up soon as well. Demonstration gardens are putting up signage. This is signage that's available. A template is available for folks. Like you can use this artwork and post on your garden where you have climate resilient examples. We provide the artwork and templates, and you can have them produced on your own. And other demonstration gardens should do this. These are not expensive. Statewide can give you everything that you need, and we encourage local associations to consider funding these as they're really low cost signs. So let's get to the goods. What are we learning, right? What are we learning from gardeners? So, like I said, gardeners across Oregon, they're seeing, we're learning what they're seeing, they're doing, and they're needing. And these responses are a snapshot of adaptation across the state. I think it's important to remember that this is participatory, community-based evidence that's gathered systematically. It doesn't replace formal research. This is what complements it. It shows us what people are experiencing and doing right now. And we have had over 1,200 gardeners in Oregon have responded to the question, "What's your garden future?" And the following data that I'm going to share reflects data that I pulled in the end of October. Keep in mind, I can also pull this data specific for county, but today we're looking at statewide, what we're seeing statewide. So, are Oregon gardeners experiencing the effects of climate change? What do you think? This is the first question that we ask in the survey. From one to, what do we say? One being not really, three somewhat, to five absolutely. The median answer is a four. This indicates that most respondents report noticeable impacts of climate change in their gardens. I think it's interesting to note that there are responses where they've noted, I haven't been gardening long enough here to really know, or they had just moved to Oregon. So that's something to keep in mind as well, but again, we can say yes, resoundingly, Oregon gardeners are experiencing the effects of climate change in the garden based on what we're hearing. In follow-up to the first question is, if you are, what are you seeing with changing climate effect in your garden? What are you seeing? And so there are five themes here that we can look at. And the word cloud that you see reflects the responses to the questions. And the preview of what these themes are heat, water, erratic weather, and more plants dying. So first up, we're going to talk about increased heat and heat stress on plants. So these are some examples of the things that we've heard. Those poor hydrangeas, mop head hydrangeas, right? I think that some of the first to show us the stress of heat when it just gets too hot. Sun scald on fruit and scorching of leaves that folks are seeing in Douglas County. A second theme for Oregon gardeners that they're observing is reduced summer moisture and water availability. For example, in Polk County, the yo-yo weather makes it very hard to judge watering. I'm having to water more often some days. That's a gardener in Lincoln County. I have a feeling that you may be reading some of these and thinking to yourself, yeah, that could be me. I have felt that too. I know I do. Longer, hotter summers. So, for example, long periods of heat in Terrebonne. Nighttime temps are warmer. Again, Terrebonne's in Jefferson County. In Tillamook, plants are blooming sooner. Summers are much drier. So the fourth aspect here is erratic or extreme weather. This is such a powerful statement. Ice storms toppling ancient trees like no one I know has ever seen. Longer drought periods and less rainfall. Insane wildfire and smoke seasons that have made it difficult to go outside and impacted wildlife, reduced snow in the winter, and just more unpredictable weather overall. Out in Umatilla County, longer heat waves, more rain than snow in early winter, windstorms, extreme variability in temperatures and wind. And then the fifth kind of theme that we see is a higher plant mortality or reduced yields. So here's a gardener in Josephine County who talks about change, that planting times have changed, and the quality of the produce has declined. Old varieties of certain plants are just not as vigorous or productive, especially with tomatoes, right? And blossom end rot and cracking, or with long established fruit trees suffering because of that erratic temperature changes that happen in the spring, and some are showing signs of dying. So I just want to take a pause here. I've done this talk a couple of times and I look at this data and talk about this data a lot, but I also don't take it for granted that, we just talked about some tough stuff, right? Hearing someone talk about losing a favorite tree or how climate change is impacting the amount of birds that they see in their gardens, this stuff can be tough. Um, and so just take a moment and pause and look at this incredible photo. There is so much creativity and determination that's happening with Oregon gardeners in the face of a changing climate. They are responding to the challenges they are facing. This is a garden that's around the corner from where I live, that during the heat dome, I saw this and I needed to get my camera and go take a photo because this is this is resistance, right? This is like determination. I am going to protect my plants. And they made it. They are still there. So what changes are gardeners making? This can include switching to drought tolerant or native plants, mulching and soil care, adding shade structures, modifying plant calendars earlier or later sowing and transplanting. So here are some of the quotes. I'm going to go a little faster through that. But folks are switching to drought tolerant or native plants, right? Planting more natives and low water use plants, trees, and shrubs, or selecting varieties that grow in warmer zones. Increasing mulching and soil care. I use wood chip and a no-dig gardening method for annuals to improve my soil quality and encourage healthy ecosystems. That's here in Washington County. Adding shade structures or planting to create shade. Um, so for example, in Jackson County, using shade cloth earlier and on plants that have not needed it in the past, even on tomato plants, and even using shade cloth to protect plants from wind. Shade cloth, we're going to get to that in a bit. I think a lot of folks are learning in the last couple of years what is shade cloth, and how do I use it. A lot of folks haven't used it in the past and are learning how to do it now. Adjusting irrigation schedule and methods, drip irrigation, right? Using it as much as possible. More natives in the ornamental portion of the garden. Again, drip irrigation, collecting rainwater is another example. Modifying planting calendars. Folks are adjusting planting times to earlier in the spring and cover plantings in Umatilla County. In Wallowa, they're growing vegetables maybe later into the fall, right? That's changing. I know that I read maybe a month or two ago from Climate Central's latest information about first freeze dates. They actually analyzed how the date of the first fall freeze, which is when the minimum temperatures at or below 32, has changed from 1970 to 2024, and they measured it in about 204 US cities. And we know that Central Oregon gardeners have noticed these changes, but the data from that study now puts Bend at number 2 in the US with a delay of 38 days for the first fall freeze average. It's a big change. So what kind of information do gardeners want? And if you are a garden educator, master gardeners, listen up. This is what your community needs and wants. And you can see some themes here. There are ways to conserve water with native plants, and they want more information, and they want community connections. They want to be more informed, which really means more education. That's on us. So I get excited when we think about what gardeners specifically around localized need, especially around localized recommendations. Master gardener educators have a real opportunity to share techniques in their demonstration gardens, and in other gardens as places to see firsthand how and what works. We talk about water conservation techniques. How do you put in a drip irrigation system? Are there other solutions better suited for my area? For garden educators, this means having hands-on workshops, doing really simple step-by-step guides, partnering with local garden centers to give workshops in the places in the community where gardeners are going. A lot of the information that folks are asking, we do have. So, 5 trees for a fire-resistant low-water landscape. We have fantastic resources at OSU Extension about fire-wise gardening, and water conservation techniques as well. And again, you can find those that have been curated on the Garden Future website. Um, for water conservation techniques, they really want to know things like how do you put in a system? Are there other solutions? Like I said earlier, many gardeners are using shade cloth for the very first time or learning what it is for the first time. So examples of how to use shade cloth, simply explained, introduced, go a really long way. And this is an example from this August. We saw on social media that Oregon gardeners were struggling with something that they thought they could be doing but had no knowledge of, and that was shade cloth. So we engaged one of our faculty. This is Logan Bennett in Douglas County. He works with me in doing these small videos. And we did it right at the beginning of a heat wave and got it up and out, and people had the information right away. And he gave a great tour of like the different ways that you can use shade cloth. This is how we put it up. It's been shared in social media. It's on our YouTube channel, on Facebook. I think at that time it had been viewed over 2,200 times. Short videos are really popular right now on Instagram and Facebook, and we're able to respond to needs and get things out to folks quickly if we keep it simple. I'm going to keep going. So remember the secret sauce here to Garden Future, and that is stories. It can simply be talking about the future. What might that be? Oregon gardeners want to be able to talk about gardening and relate to others. How can you simply foster more discussions about climate change and gardening? And some ideas are things like climate change cafes where folks get together, talk about climate change, or we provide opportunities for crowdsourcing. Community can help grow community knowledge. I was just talking to a professor who has been doing climate change walks. Um, where families can get together, they're given a map, and they do a walk, and they can anticipate looking at natural areas and saying, this is how it would be impacted, or this is how we could see this changing. We could do that with gardens. There's all different kinds of ways to do this. I invite gardeners and especially master gardener volunteers to really think about creating opportunities for people to come together, to talk, to share, to strategize, these kinds of things. That's a huge step itself. So there's a place you can start if you're asking, like, what should I do? And that is you can answer our 3 questions, and you can stay in the conversation and sign up for our emails once you answer those 3 questions. Engage your community in Garden Future, and prioritize the education you're providing to include responses to what gardeners are asking for. And I encourage folks to get creative, and I hope that you'll be a champion for Garden Future. Thank you.
LeAnn, we got the chat working, so there have been a whole lot of comments um, to you. So if you want to take a look at into the chat, you can find all sorts of responses about that echo what you've been presenting.
Yeah, it's always so not affirming when you ask a question and there's no answers, right?
Oh, I know. It took me a couple of minutes to find out where the glitch was, but we did find it, and so
Oh no, it's all good. Yeah, Kat, we have not seen a freeze in Portland. I know, right? Your nasturtiums are going bonkers. Mine too. I can't believe that it's January and I'm seeing a nasturtium still blooming, right? It's not yours isn't fully blooming anymore, but wow, I used burlap to shade brassicas this summer, even the heat tolerant ones, right? Interesting.
and other people are seeing the extremes of weather. It's it's inconsistent. The hot to the cold to the
Right,
and
right. That unknowing element, right?
yeah,
That's really requiring us to be like going with the flow more. Things are not as expected. Your
yeah.
crocosmia is blooming right now. Well, Shelley, lucky for that hummingbird in your garden, I'm sure. Climate chaos in our house. I start seeds and I start backups for those. Cat, that's a smart gardener, is what that is. Um, this is great. Yeah. Were there any questions or should I go through some more of these?
Well, you keep going through those. That most of the comments are in the chat, not in the questions.
I'm
But
definitely
I
going to
will
want to
go
download all
through.
these. These are great.
Now, here's a question. If you mulch more, will that encourage the presence of slugs? And what to do about that?
Well, pick your poison. Right. Um, well, yes, of course. I guess it depends on what kind of mulch. Now, remember that not all mulch is wood-based mulch.
Mm,
So, we know that slugs like wet wood, right? Or anything that's
yeah.
decomposing. So if we're talking about wet wood chips, then yes, you're going to get slugs. But could you also bait for slugs? And when I say bait, I don't necessarily mean poison. I mean, could you use beer or bread dough or, those other kinds of ways that we can like trap slugs? You could do that. Yeah. Yeah, right. But I think about like when do we have slugs that are really bad, and that's going to be in spring, not necessarily at a time when you need to be putting down a lot of mulch. Mulch may be something once it gets hotter and drier is something that's when you're really going to be wanting to layer it on, and maybe the slugs aren't as much of a problem then. I don't know. That's a pick your poison.
I've been mulching, or I've been putting down arborist chips for 5 years, and slugs are not a problem in my garden. I find them every now and then, but it's not like they've burrowed into the wood and just gone
Mm-mm.
crazy. Not at all.
That's good to know, Hope.
So here's another question. Are you I've been tracking, Cheryl says, I've been tracking frost dates by weather station. The answer to is it changing depends on the date range. It's hard for me to back up my observations with the data. Has
Mhm.
OSU addressed this?
Yeah. Has OSU addressed that it's hard to back it up with data?
Does OSU have any data that they can back it up with?
Well, and the first part of that is about frost dates.
Um, yes, frost dates.
So that, so there's a couple of things. I mean, we can look at the changing planting, the changing planting zones, and you can find that there's an article specifically about that does use OSU data and research that talks about the changing planting zones. And you can find that on the Garden Future website. And I see that some folks have been sharing that link in the chat. Thank you for that. Um, what I did mention in my talk was about that data that came out from Climate Central, I think is what it's called, that rated Bend as number 2 as seeing
Yeah.
the biggest change. And that is based on data from NOAA. So yes, that does exist. Is it from OSU? It's not from OSU, but it's from NOAA, which is pretty good. I shared a whole article, email about that in one of the Garden Future emails. So if you signed up for those, you would get them. But
Oh,
I can find, I think it's called, if you Google Climate Central changing frost date, you should be able to find that information. It's fascinating. It's very information. And that aspect of like, are we keeping up with is our data collection keeping up with what's happening and changes? It's happening, it's hard. It's happening quickly. Do we have all the information? No, and that's part of the thing about Garden Future. It's like trying to find out like what are people seeing and what are you dealing with? And really knowing that a lot of this is, using the power of crowd share and gardeners helping other gardeners is a really great place to be right now.
Well, talking about sharing, Carmen is still harvesting cherry tomatoes.
Get
She has
out.
a plastic over it, over the plants, and in very cold nights, I put a plastic cover, a blanket over, and another plastic cover on top. She says, I don't have flowers growing anymore, but tomatoes are still maturing.
Carmen, this is
Pretty
magic. I
incredible.
mean, there's those things like, can we find the positives here? And to be able to have a homegrown tomato in January. Carmen, where are you? What county are you in?
Carmen, Clatsop County in the
Uh,
Coast Range.
Get out of here. Wow, that's incredible. Enjoy that cherry tomato.
Now,
Jeff.
Linda asks, are the resources that you've referenced to be shared with people who contact us through the helpline? And how can we find them to do that?
The resources that I've shared today.
Yeah.
So the resources for people who contact you through the helpline, they're going to be, yes, you can find that all on the Garden Future website. Those are all the different categories. So if people are reaching out to you wanting to know things about the changing planting zones, yes. Help with drip irrigation, yes. With native plants, tons of great information. Yes, it's all curated and you can find that on the Garden Future website. There's only two, I think only two pages. Let me get the um on Garden Future, but it's gonna be, I'll put it here in the chat. This is our main page, and you'll see that there's a secondary page here that says resources for gardening in a changing climate. That's where you'll see tons of resources there. And this should really give you a great place. Like if you wanted to talk to folks about having specific resources, that would be a great place to send them. Or for you to use, right? And if there are things that you're not seeing here that you want, let me know. Um, I share information, I curate this site, not just on OSU resources, but also national resources, other extension resources where it's applicable as well. And I can tell you that we don't have a lot of really good, easy, simple drip irrigation stuff. So if you are a master gardener looking for a project, that would be a great one.
Interesting. Here's a question from Sally. Are there any upcoming workshops for simple irrigation solutions or setting up rain barrels for the homeowner? I'm in Multnomah County. I bet if she goes to 10-Minute University, she will
Mhm.
find what she's looking for.
Correct. If you Google 10-Minute University, that's through Clackamas County Master Gardeners. They have an incredible collection of resources that are online for videos and like one-pagers that can give you that kind of information. The Multnomah County Master Gardener Association also does similar talks as what Washington County does tonight. I don't know what their upcoming schedule is, but that would be a good one to check.
We had Washington County had a presentation, one of these monthly presentations on rain barrels a few months ago. So if you go to our YouTube page, just well, you can go actually to our website and then it'll take you to the YouTube page. But we've got an hour-long presentation on rain barrels, Washington County.
Cool. Oh, that's excellent. Somebody was just asking me about rain barrels the other day, and I was having a hard time answering them, the pros and
Oh,
cons when
okay.
you have.
Here, Stephanie just posted it's rainwater harvesting for landscape use. It was the October 7th presentation.
Great.
So you should be able to find it. And someone just asked, is there a Facebook group for Oregon Master Gardener Program? There's a number of Facebook groups. I don't know if there's one that's the whole state or not.
There's a page. There's not a group.
Okay.
There's the pages that for the different counties, and then there's the statewide one where that's where I share all the Garden Future content. But for master gardeners to talk among themselves, no, there is not one. Um, and what is happening in their area, no. But I can tell you that I do have a um, if you were a master gardener and you want to be on the inside scoop of like what's happening with Garden Future, what kind of new resources do we have, please email me and I will put you onto a special insider list that I have that
Oh,
is similar to the Garden Future emails, but it's just for insiders. I don't publicly give that out because it's not for everybody. It's only for like our master gardener volunteers or like sign me up. I want to be a Garden Future, behind the scenes person and spearhead it. But my email address I will put in here. And I would say, please email me and I will put you on that so you can find out new resources that are coming out. But yeah, there you go. The Tualatin Hills Parks and Recreation District hosts a series of community gardens. I would propose they encourage the members of each one to have a potluck for fraternity and support. Bruce, that's so great. Yes, Tualatin Hills Parks and Rec District does amazing stuff, and so does your soil and water conservation districts.
yes.
Both fantastic resources for gardeners. That would be great. Yeah, potlucks for fraternity and support. I can't tell you enough how important this work is. Those simple things are so important right now.
Okay, I believe we've gotten through um, the questions. I mean, it's sort of confusing. We're working on both chat and Q&A, but I think we've covered everything. So, LeAnn, this has been very useful, and a lot of kudos are coming in on the chat.
Okay,
We're going to move now to our chapter meeting, but if you want to stay on and look through, any
I
more of the
would.
chat, then please go ahead and do that.
I'm going to copy and paste it. It's great. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording at this point.
Thank you, everyone.